Hello, friends. I'm so excited to welcome you to episode 7 of Courageous Communication. Today, we have a special friend joining us that is going to discuss mindsets that keep you stuck and strategies to overcome negative thought patterns. My special friend's name is Sarah Almendariz Rivera, and she is an LPC-S who was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. She received her graduate education at UTSA, where she completed her master's in community counseling. Since 2010, she has worked as a licensed professional counselor, offering emotional support to children, adults, and families. Sarah has provided services in children's homes, juvenile justice centers, pediatric physical rehab, and substance abuse programs. She opened a solo practice in 2017 that grew into a group practice in 2020. She and her team specialize in treating anxiety and trauma. Sarah believes everyone could use a trusted guide in the middle of our journey and works to reach and teach to inspire transformation and create contagious change. Please help me to welcome my friend, Sarah.
Hey guys,
Hello.
how's it going?
I am so excited you're here today.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Sarah, I know you have a whole lot of information to give us and some really good information and some really relevant information. So, I'm just going to turn it over to you, and then we will just take in so much of your knowledge. So, I'm so excited. So, take it from here, Miss Sarah.
Yeah, again, thanks so much for having me. I think there's a lot of different things that I'd love to go over today. And even just in this moment, God's kind of taming my heart and saying, hey, like, let's take it down a notch and just kind of, center myself into this moment to see where He wants to take us and all of the fun things that we're going to learn today. So I guess to start, again, my name is Sarah, and a lot of what I do is just helping other people in different capacities and in different ways. And one of the most recent things that I've been learning is a bit more about business. And that's kind of different because as a counselor, we're not really taught how to be business owners and such. And so as I'm kind of reflecting on my entire life, I've noticed that there's kind of been this push that God's placed in my heart for growth. And you know what I realized is how many times I get in the way of my own self and of what He's telling me to do. And so in that, what I noticed was that I wasn't the only one, and that this kind of stuck mentality of like, I want to grow and I want to move and I want to do and I want to dream was constantly being interrupted or stifled or completely like in disarray. And I thought, why is that happening? If there's this passion in my heart and a desire for more, why is this consistently happening? And as I just kind of continue to talk to people and observe other people, not even like clinically, but just kind of in life, I realized I don't think I'm the only one.
Mm.
And the best way that I can describe it is just this feeling of being stuck. And everyone says, like, just get unstuck. And you say, that's a great idea. But how on earth would you do that? And so one of the things that I came to learn is that before you can provide a solution, you first have to identify the problem.
Absolutely.
Everyone wants to know, like, how to get unstuck. Well, girlfriend, first we got to figure out what kind of stuck you're in.
Yeah.
And so as I became a business owner and just kind of learning some of the ins and outs, not just working with people, but working with business and such, I realized that there are some common themes here. And one of the things that I've noticed is there's common, like, stuck mindsets. And this is not from any like professional research or like statistically supported outside of just Sarah's raw statistics, which I think are many and plentiful. I've met with hundreds, if not thousands of people, but there's kind of some top 4 negative mindsets that I've kind of seen and observed, not just in other people, but like I said, in myself. And there's 3 that I kind of want to focus on because I feel like in some ways that they're a lot more common. And so one of those is the scarcity mindset. Another one of those is the imposter syndrome. And the other one is perfectionism. And so I kind of figured that first, again, we have to identify the problem, or in this case, the problematic thinking patterns, before we can shift in with some of the solutions. So, in that, I'm all about making myself an example because I think that's how we learn, right? And I realized too that with, to start, for example, scarcity mindset, really what it is just this over fixation on the things that you don't have, right? So it's suggestive that there's like limited resources out there and that we should all protect, preserve, and like withhold some of our resources because at any moment in time there could not be enough. So we tend to only focus on what we don't have. And there's been times when I myself have struggled with that. I mean, at different times, whether it's in a relationship or with finances. And it's a fear. It's a fear-based mentality where so many times you're praying to God for all of the things that you don't have without really reflecting and having gratitude for the things that you do. And so as you mentioned earlier, I started as a solo business practice, and that was really scary. And for a lot of years, I didn't do it because I was too scared. I worried most about not having clients, about not having enough funds, about the finances not being there, and quite frankly, failing. So the thought of leaving, an organizational structure that was already there in place and somebody else is paying my benefits and somebody else is signing my checks seems so much safer to me that for years I didn't move. I was too scared. And I realized that that scared mentality was actually fixated with scarcity.
Mhm.
I was worried about what I wasn't gonna have. And so as a result, I wasn't moving. I was staying in the same company, I was staying in the same business, but I wasn't moving. And by default, I wasn't growing.
Mm.
So if you're not moving, it's suggestive to say that you're stagnant. I
Absolutely.
was completely stagnant, where the ideas and the dreams were there, but I wasn't moving. And I realize that this doesn't just happen with business, but I've also seen this with kind of unhealthy relationships too. I've seen this with young people when they form really unhealthy relationship and friendship patterns. And I once had this young person say something really interesting, and I thought, yikes, like how profound is that? But she said, I'd rather have terrible friends than no friends at all.
Mm.
And I thought, huh, like how much can we relate to that? Like, I'd rather have a sucky job than no job at all. Like, that's one way of thinking.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Or you can reflect on, I don't know, the millions of people in this world who could potentially be a friend. But you
Hmm.
become fixated on the possibility of not having that you stay connected to sometimes the unhealthy things that you do. Even just this morning, I was brushing my teeth and I'm running a little low on toothpaste, right? And so that empty toothpaste roll is like, hey, you need some more toothpaste. Then I become fixated on not having enough toothpaste. That guess what I start doing? I start applying less and less toothpaste instead of just going out and buying more toothpaste. But I think that in a lot of ways, we're kind of like that, where we become so hyper focused that we start giving a little bit less and a little bit less instead of being fruitful and capitalizing on all of the resources that we do have. So that's scarcity mindset, negative mindset number one.
Let me ask you some questions, some follow-ups
Please.
on this
Yeah.
scarcity, okay? So, just personally for
Yeah.
you talked about the fact that you were, working in kind of community services and kind of these organizations that, like you said, provided quote unquote for you, right? You had all these things that, so by not leaving, you said you stayed there maybe too long in that situation because you had dreams and aspirations of going out, but you were scared. What did that do to you emotionally, like in the inside? Did it stifle some of your joy? Did it create in you resistance towards the job that you had, or,
Mhm.
greater frustration levels, burnout, things like, give us some insight onto that, like how scarcity can also affect you in other ways, having
Oh,
that
yeah.
mindset.
I mean, all of the above. I think you said it best, but I think ultimately what you look at is this lack of fulfillment, where you know that there's something bigger, greater, better for you, and it's out of reach. So, quite frankly, it leaves you feeling discouraged. It leaves you feeling disappointed. It leaves you feeling burned out. It leaves you feeling just tired with your current situation. It's kind of like a chronic emotional fatigue,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And
That's a
that's
great way to
hard,
say that.
where there's no really true experience of excitement and engagement and just overall encouragement, all the E words, I guess. You're
Right.
not really getting those, but yet you stay. And I think, unfortunately, that's all too common. I can remember even being in a relationship that way. It was just exhausting, but there
Mhm.
was a fear that in losing this, you would be somehow missing on an opportunity. So you
Well, and
stay there.
absolutely, and then I think the more time you sometimes have invested into those relationships, the scareder you get, right? Like, "Oh, well, my time has passed me," or, "When am I gonna have an
Right,
opportunity?" So, absolutely.
right. Yeah, and again, I think a lot of times you've heard this as, like, this fear of missing out, like
Mhm.
FOMO, right? I think
Yeah,
it is kind of an offset of the scarcity mindset. So instead of just kind of waiting and being patient or kind of reevaluating things from a different lens, is you stay just kind of stuck. And then you fear that you're missing out on things, so then you jump ship on the first thing that like, it's not well thought out at that point.
mhm.
It's just simply fear-based actions all the time, and it's exhausting.
Okay, I like that. That type of negative thinking can just lead us to a place where we are emotionally exhausted,
Mhm,
physically exhausted,
mhm,
and even it starts to affect our ability to make good decisions, to
mhm.
move forward in our life, just stuck, like you said.
Right. It just holds you back. And I
Mhm.
think another type of mindset that really keeps you stuck is one that's kind of caught a little bit more conversation lately, I feel like, and that's
Okay.
called imposter syndrome.
Okay.
And I feel like now when I say that word, it's not so foreign. But I think if I would have said that word 5 years ago, people would have said, "What are you talking about?" But with imposter syndrome, the likelihood is you've heard this at some point in time or another, but it's kind of this belief that you're not as competent as people think you are. That maybe that despite some of the evidence that has indeed said, no, 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 like you've earned this position, you're like, I don't know if I deserve it. Even just, I think, in life, we have different times of being an imposter syndrome. But,
Mhm.
I was reading this book once. It was, I believe it was called Thinking Like a CEO. And there was a time there when the CEO, they're like, "Sir, what do you think? Like, what should we do with this really large corporation? And you're the one who needs to make the decision here." And him kind of being like, who's the guy who makes the decisions? And everyone's like, "You are. Like, you're the guy who makes the decisions." Kind of made me laugh because he was suggestive that that type of imposter syndrome, it doesn't get somehow removed magically, like the older we get necessarily, or like the more experience that we gain necessarily. But I mean, there was different times when, I realized when I married my husband, like, oh my gosh, I'm somebody's wife, and like Mrs. Rivera, and I'm like, my mother-in-law's here, like, where is she at, right? But like, oh me, like that's me. I've had
Mhm.
first-time parents often say this too, second-time or third-time parents too, like, "You're gonna leave me with this infant by myself? Like, are you sure you want me to keep this baby? Like, is somebody gonna come over, like, to keep eyes on me because, I don't think I'm ready for this." But the truth is many times we are ready for those opportunities. but we don't capitalize on them because, again, we're scared. We have somehow convinced ourselves that we're not the ideal candidate for whatever job, whether that's as a mother or a father, as a spouse, as a leader, a director, a supervisor, a manager. I mean, there's so many times when we don't capitalize on business ventures simply because of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe I shouldn't. And, I felt that even when I started college. I remember thinking, I'm an imposter. Like, so many people here are so much smarter than me. Like, I don't think I'm ready for this world. And then again, with work, I found that to be the case too. Like, yeah, like we're kind of looking around and saying, like, who's the person in charge? And like your kids are like, and you're like, oh my God, like I'm the one in charge. And I absolutely think that whether that's personally or professionally, there's kind of like this, oh my gosh, like I'm the one, like, but don't you see right through me? And unfortunately, it kind of leaves you with a lot of worry because you're kind of identifies yourself as this fake or phony
Mhm.
or imposter. And so when you're not truly settled into that role, you never truly feel settled in that role. So what does that create? I mean, it creates a whole lot of instability. One thing
Mhm.
that I always tell people is if you ever want to rock somebody's world, just make things unstable, make them unpredictable, and make them fall out of routine. So if you're constantly feeling on edge, like it's not like you don't know what you're doing, you're never going to truly feel settled in your spirit emotionally. That's really, really tough, and again, I think there's so many people who are being more honest and saying, "I struggle with this a lot."
Yeah, absolutely. That takes me back to, like, going to my first session.
Right? Yeah.
Okay.
Like, "Oh, you're like, is there somebody gonna be
"You're
watching me
here
from the mirror?" Like,
to see me?" Like, "Are you sure? You
right.
Oh my
That's
goodness,
exactly right.
and you're gonna come back and see me again? What?
Mhm.
Why?" Like,
Right.
and so absolutely, I think that if you haven't identified that you've struggled with this before, maybe it's just that you haven't
Mhm.
clicked into the self-awareness part that you've struggled with
Right.
imposter syndrome before
Yeah.
because it's there. It's
Right.
prevalent. It's there for us.
Right.
And it reminds me of um I can't remember where I was reading it in Forbes maybe, but it was talking about women in business, and it's just really talking about uh, working women. But working women are less likely to apply for positions that they
Mm,
do not meet every qualification for,
mm.
whereas men are more likely to say, I meet some of these qualifications, so I'm going to go ahead and apply for this position. That's the kind of mindset shift that we as women have to have as well.
Absolutely. And, that kind of brings me into that third negative thinking pattern that I was mentioning earlier, which is the perfectionism. And I think you said it best, Jessica, is, we take a look at these criteria and it even says like preferred, not even required, but preferred. And we say we don't hit all of those, so we don't. And
Mhm.
that's really a perfectionistic mindset. It's this kind of belief that if you're not able to do things with complete perfection, that they're not worth doing at all. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, it creates a really unrealistic and unhealthy expectation on that person who's constantly trying to achieve these outrageously high goals. But I think we all fall victim to that at a certain extent. I mean, I can remember multiple children that I've seen just along the years, and there's 5, 6 years old coloring for goodness sake, right, on these little pieces of paper. Something falls out of the lines. They grab the sheet of paper, they tear it up and throw it away. And I think, baby, like what just happened there? Why I messed up? Like, how did you mess up? Well, I colored outside the lines. And I thought, where is that coming from? This push that if it's not completely perfect, that it must be thrown out. And unfortunately, that doesn't just stop on a piece of coloring book paper when you're 6. Is unfortunately that can really, really linger well into adulthood. And that's a lot of pressure. There's even some movies, and it's a silly one, but it's one of my favorites, and it's terrible, but it's a comedy for a reason. It's called Talladega Nights, but on there it says, "If you're not first, you're last."
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I thought, is that really like accurate? Like that's not true. If you're not first, you're last. No, if you're not first, you're second or third or fourth.
I use that all the time. It's so funny that you brought it up that I tell people that all the time. It's like there's this mentality that if you're not first, you're last.
Right.
And
And
that's
there's
not truth.
Yeah, and that's kind of funny because it pulls a little bit on the competitive side, and one of the things that I always get asked is, "Well, how do you know if it's perfectionism, and how do you know if it's not just you holding yourself to a higher standard?"
Mm.
And I
That's a
think
good
that's a
question.
really great question, yeah, and the answer is simple, is you look at the feelings that it leaves you with. And so when you're striving for a perfectionism or perfectionistic outcomes, it's going to leave you with certain feelings. And if it's perfectionistic, this negative mindset that we're talking about, it's going to leave you feeling completely discouraged, anxious, frustrated,
Mhm.
burned out. I mean, quite frankly, you're going to be completely overwhelmed. You're going to be depleted all the time. And it's a different type of exhaustion. A lot of times, and this is really difficult when people think that it's a physical type of exhaustion, like burnout, like you just need to take a nap. It's not that kind of exhaustion. What that's suggestive of is like a physical type, like I just need a nap. And then when I wake up, I'll feel better. It's not like that. What this is it's an emotional or mental fatigue. It leaves you with this heaviness in your mind. That's how you know this is perfectionistic. Whereas if I'm holding myself to a higher standard, it's something that's it's an internal moral compass, if you will, that's driving you.
Mhm.
And with that drive, it leaves you feeling challenged. It leaves you feeling content that you've done your best part. It leaves you with a completely different set of emotions.
Mhm.
It leaves you feeling like, hey, you're doing a good job,
Yeah.
confident in your decision making. Two very different routes that this could take. So if ever
Yeah.
you want to know, like, am I being perfectionistic or just holding myself to a high regard? Well,
Absolutely.
girl, like, why don't you take a look at how it's making you feel?
Mhm. I like that. I like that a lot. That kind of in my mind, when you were saying that, it kind of mimics the dynamic of acute stress versus chronic stress, right?
Yeah.
If even if we're perfect at this, then I'm gonna have to be perfect at the next thing. Then I'm gonna have to be perfect at the next thing. It's always there, and so
Right.
it becomes chronic. Whereas, oh well, I did something well, and then I can celebrate that. Or I built
Mhm.
some resilience in this, like you see the fruit in the acute
Right.
versus the chronic. So that kind of reminded me of that for some reason in my brain.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think if we went there, there's probably a whole slew of different examples that we can think of. Even when I was mentioning earlier, when it was time to grow, for example, from a solo practice to a group practice,
Mhm.
I wanted to do everything perfect when
Mm.
I haven't even tried it before.
Uh-huh.
And now I've gotten to a point where I can say, like, "Don't do what I did, like, this is what I did," and be able to laugh at it, right? And
Yeah,
not hold this kind of pressure on myself to even say, like, "I've done it all perfect, right, and well. Do
right.
it like me."
Mhm.
It's not even that, it's quite the opposite, which is, "I haven't done everything perfect. These are tons of mistakes. Look, learn from them so that you can move faster than I did."
Right. And I do think that that is a common misconception when people are looking from the outside in, is
Mhm.
that when they see someone doing well or having success, or we don't always see all of the failures that came in that. We do
Yeah.
not see all of the stress, all of the
Yeah.
hours, all of those things. We just see them being successful, and that's what we want. We want that piece, but that piece is not something that's typically achievable without all the other pieces.
Right, right. And I heard it say, somebody said this really well. I don't know if where it was on, so don't quote me on it, but don't compare the middle of somebody else's story to the start of your own.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
And you're like, yeah, like
Mhm.
that's so interesting. Even, sometimes even my daughter and I will see like this older couple and they're holding hands and you're like, I want to be like that. But we don't know what they've been through.
Right.
It maybe hasn't all been rainbows and butterflies, and they'll be quick to tell you, no, we've been through quite a bit of mistakes and downs, and valleys. So, unfortunately, though, we just capitalize on what we believe to be this perfect idea.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
even just as a parent, right? Sometimes we have this expectation in ourselves to be able to do it all
Mhm.
while also looking, perfect and fresh faced. Like your kids are all there and they all have wonderful manners and they all eat their vegetables and everybody picks up after themselves. And like that's not nice. It's not nice to think that about yourself and that being possible every day. A one off, sure. But to hold that kind of pressure within yourself all the time, it's
Mhm.
defeating. It's completely defeating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just for myself, when we're talking about perfectionism, always, God calls us to be hospitable, right? And so
Mhm.
I feel like in me, I have a very hospitable heart. Like,
Uh-huh.
I love to open my home up to people. But see, the problem is that the devil works on me in another way with that, is that everything needs to be in its place. It needs to be showcased in certain ways. The food has to be like perfect finger food looking, and that was something I had to really, and then at the end of that, then I'm miserable. I'm kinda like, "When are these people leaving? Get away." And it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with the fact that I have set an impossible standard to meet and continue on with throughout the whole weekend or throughout a period of time. And what I learned a few years ago, which I'm so grateful for, is that there is a way to be hospitable, but also
Mhm.
kind to yourself and release some
Oh,
of the pressure that, it has to look this certain way and it has to be this way. Every, you know, gathering that's at your house doesn't have to look like it's this huge party and extravaganza and everything has to be perfect. And so that was
right.
kind of one of those situations where I had to learn to let go because I had to come to terms with the fact that I was putting that perfectionism on myself.
Right.
And then people would come to my home and the next time, guess what their expectation was?
For it to be perfect and look like it did
Yeah,
last time,
we'll just
right?
have it at our house because she clearly
Right,
enjoys this.
right.
No, she doesn't, not anymore.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the things that I have had to definitely work
Oh,
on
yeah.
and let go of a little bit.
For sure, for sure. So and you can see how that kind of plagues us on, of course, the grander scale, but really on, like, the micro side of life,
Absolutely.
where things just have to be perfect and done well all the time.
Mhm.
From cleaning our house to how we're dressed to certain, appearance physically to, for goodness sake, like what decorations are inside of your home, to writing a blog, whatever it is. And so we're not, I mean, these are really, really large scaled issues, but they manifest on these micro levels.
Yes. And I
And
think the
without
micro levels are what
conscious,
take control
right.
of you.
Exactly, and without those intentional efforts to observe all of those things, they really kind of swarm together and create, like, mass emotional hysteria, if we're being real. You know what I mean? So like you said, you had to learn how to let that go, and that's hard because everybody when we say, like, "Just get unstuck, just let it go and let God," and you're like, Like, yeah, like I want to do that, but how?
Mhm.
And so I'd like to kind of shift gears a little bit to talk about how to get unstuck. So first we identified all the stuck things, all the
Absolutely.
yucky muck that's kind of kept us there emotionally, financially, spiritually, whatever it is. That's the problem. Now it's time to implement solutions because I think sometimes even us as counselors, we're notorious for speaking in vague terms, kind
Absolutely.
of like philosophical and abstract and emotional. And I've had so many people say that's why I don't want to go to counseling because I don't know how to apply anything. Like it's just like these great ideas and gestures and philosophical points. And you're like, I can't disagree, but what does that mean for my real life application?
Absolutely.
And so in that, I think kind of going back to the initial negative mindset that we were talking about with the scarcity mindset is
Absolutely.
really to shift that into a more abundance seeking mindset. So
Mhm.
earlier we were talking about this fear with scarcity mindset that there's not enough to go around. Well, that's simply just one way of looking at it. And so really when we take a look at it from a different lens, it's from an abundance mentality or an abundance perspective. And people are like, okay, that's a pretty word. Like, how would you do such a thing? Right. And I
Ab
think, Mary Bates, you could probably agree that having just like this attitude of gratitude, we've heard that a lot, but just being appreciative and thankful for the things that are going right and well.
Absolutely.
Simply for the things that you're thankful for without this fixation on the things that you don't have because our minds are wired that way. They're wired to become fixated on what's right in front of you.
Mhm.
I often tell people this if I told you to not think about a purple spotted elephant because we don't want you thinking about purple spotted elephants because purple spotted elephants are not great. What are you going to think about?
Purple
I'm gonna think
spotted
about a
elephant.
purple spotted elephant. Like,
Mhm.
that's just the mind, the
Right.
brain and how it works. Like, we can't override that.
Mhm.
Like, it's simply the way the brain is. It's an organism that we've been able to learn a little bit about, and that's the way it is.
Mhm.
So, if we know that it gets fixated on something, what are you gonna choose to fixate on?
Right. Because then the opposite's true. If I say, "Go and find every single red car," all you would see is red cars everywhere.
Exactly.
So that's the difference.
Oh my gosh, exactly. And I help a lot of younger kiddos. I think the little ones are so much fun, like the ones, twos, and threes. And one of the first things that I do when I talk to different caregivers is to shift how you speak to the child. So rather than saying stop running, stop running, stop running, no running. We don't run in here. What are they hearing? Running, running, running.
Exactly.
So then they run versus saying something like walking feet only.
Mhm.
Use your walking feet. Only walking feet inside. What do they hear? They're hearing walking feet. So what do they do? Well, they have their
Walk.
walking feet. Right. Stop
Absolutely.
hitting your sister. Stop hitting. We don't hit. That's not nice. No hitting. What are they hearing? Hitting, hitting, hitting. Versus gentle hands, gentle touches, hands stay to your own body, whatever it is, then they hear it different. But if that's the record that's playing out in your mind,
Mhm.
you're not going to have enough. Don't make this investment. You could lose. You could fail. This could never grow. Nobody's going to buy from you. Nobody's going to pay attention. I mean, there's no other guy out there. There's no other woman out there who's going to love you. Like, what are you going to think about?
Absolutely.
And so that shift from how you frame your own thoughts and focusing really on the positive things that you do want. And then, of course, having the appreciation for the things that you already do.
Mhm.
The things that you already do. And so that focus on what you have is really, really key also. So it's having that attitude of gratitude, but also really being able to focus on the things that you have and be appreciative of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. So
And I
finding that content.
exactly. To say I don't have that dream car that I really, really want, but I do have a car that'll take me from here to there. Last
Mhm.
I checked, if I give it a little knock, that AC will come up when it's 100 degrees outside in San Antonio, Texas.
Absolutely.
Is last I looked, I've got 4 tires on it that are getting me through. Like, rather than having to wake up an hour and a half earlier to ride the bus and waiting on it for 2 hours later, like, this is what I have right now, and I'm appreciative of that.
Mhm.
And at the same token, if you're a bus rider, to say, I'm so glad that there's public transportation in a place like this so that I can get to work. I love that my bus driver is the one who has to deal with all of this traffic and not me.
Absolutely.
I'm so thankful that if I wanted to read a book and not look at the road, I'm able to do that.
Mhm,
I love that every time I come in and it's cold outside, it's warm in here.
mhm.
So being able to focus and capitalize on those positive thoughts inside of your mind will begin to help you look at the amount of abundant blessings that you do have in your life.
Yes, yes, preach, I love it. This is great.
The next thing that we have, I believe, on our list was imposter syndrome, right? So, how on earth do we shift that? And the best way to shift that is to have an air of confidence about you. And again, it's like, just be more confident. You're like, wow, thank you, ma'am, for that wonderful piece of knowledge. But how on earth do you do that? Right?
Mhm.
And so earlier I was saying that imposter syndrome has a lot to do with this belief that you haven't earned the position that you're in
Mhm. Right.
despite contrary evidence. And that's the piece that I think a lot of people miss is the evidence part. So you say, I am a bad mom. I'm a terrible father. Okay. Like I hear you and I'm seeing what you're saying. But what are some examples of the opposite? What are some examples is that you are indeed a good parent? And it comes all the time. It really does. You're in HEB and somebody says, "Wow, that your child is so well behaved." And you think, "Well, for you right now, you should see him at home." You've just overridden the compliment.
Yes, yes. I'm glad you said that. Yes.
Isn't it so true though?
Be able to accept a compliment.
Mhm. And those are gonna be the evidence pieces that you hold on to. So when somebody says, "Oh my gosh, you look so handsome today." Wait, you don't say, "Well, I just threw this on and it's just what I had in the back of my closet." Like, you're overriding the compliment, where you simply say, "Thank you." And I think those are really gonna be the evidence that we need to plug into our heart because those can then become positive affirmations.
Mhm. Yeah.
So we take what we've heard because a lot of times when I'm talking about being more confident is people have a bit of a hard time finding confident statements within themselves, so they can't even come up with it right away, and that's okay because that'll come with confidence. But sometimes taking environmental input or maybe what you've heard from others in the past is helpful.
Mhm.
Somebody who maybe said, "You have a beautiful smile," one time. I don't care if it was the librarian, in the last bookstore that you went into. That it doesn't matter
Right.
because it's what was said.
Yeah.
That's what she told you, right? Somebody who said, "You're super creative and talented." You hold on to some of those things and say, "I'm super creative and talented. I
Mhm.
have a beautiful smile." So you're kind of building your own confidence
Mhm.
so that when you get certain opportunities that you capitalize on them because you know that you deserve that. You're confident enough to accept it. Yeah.
No, absolutely, and I do think that there is a maybe even a history of, um, a stifling confidence, in
Mhm.
young people because we don't want them to seem arrogant or we don't want them to come
Right.
off in certain ways, and so sometimes I think there has been a history of people kind of telling others like, "Okay, we know that's good,
Yeah.
but,
I keep it
like,
down.
kinda keep
Mhm.
it down in the back," and I think that for some people, there are the appropriate measures to share that with, but then there for other people, that can be the thing that changes their confidence level and their ability to see themselves as good and
Right.
productive and helpful and, a shining star, whatever it is, it stifles them. And so we have to be careful with that as well.
Right. And so it always is approached with humility and humbleness. But again, this is kind of like that internal record that's playing in your own four walls, which is your mind, right? So
Mhm.
that's the internal record. We're not we're not putting it on speakerphones, outside for the entire world to say, Like, I'm great and phenomenal, just in case you're wondering, you know, like not necessarily that way, but it's really that internal shift in the reframing of a mindset that happens again here within your own four walls in your own mind. And you're
Mhm.
right, because sometimes if it's projected outward, it could really be misinterpreted, misconstrued, and projected in a way that you don't want to be, as seen as arrogant or, you know, difficult to be around and such. So again, these are some of those internal things that we want to reflect on to say, how is my confidence doing here? If I'm feeling like an imposter, how come?
Absolutely.
And
Very
taking a
good.
look at and last but not least is in terms of perfectionism, one of kind of the best ways to combat that is to really increase your levels of tolerance. So most perfectionists are intolerant. What are they intolerant of? Well, mistakes, doing things in different ways, failing, if you will. They're intolerant. So perfectionists are intolerant. So what do we have to do to work on that? Well, we have to grow more tolerant. Well, how do you grow more tolerant? Somebody would say there's lots of different ways. But one of the best ways is to really, really accept the fact that there's three things that you can control and three things only. Everything else doesn't matter how much you moan, groan, or scream. And that's your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. That's it. So I'm quite tolerant of other people because I've already accepted the fact that I cannot control them. I cannot control their level of output. I can control mine, right? So instead of looking at my partner and saying, "You're not doing it right," I say, "That's the way he's doing it. If I was doing it, I'd do it another way, but I'm not the one doing it. My actions right now are not to do that."
Mhm.
And so once you can admit that you have control over yourself and no control over someone else, it really
Absolutely.
just kind of makes life a little bit easier.
Absolutely freeing.
Absolutely free. You know, when my kids were younger, it was like so frequent the amount of cup spillage that would occur. And you would think, like, don't they grow out of that in elementary? No, no. And it got to the point where initially I was like, like it's gonna spill and people are gonna like it's falling in your food, whatever. There came a point when I said, well, it's already spilled. Like, what are we gonna do? It got on my food. Okay, it's gonna give it a little flavor. like, let's just clean it up, get some more, and life will go on. And I realized that my own tolerance levels were actually increasing. Right, where before I didn't have much tolerance to it at all. It was very dysregulating and it messed things up.
Mhm.
And so in time, I started taking control of my behaviors or reactions to it, my thoughts about it. And by default, my emotions were regulated because of it. Like, spilled another one. Like, okay, what are we going to do about it? Life will go on.
Yeah,
So if we
absolutely.
can accept, and that takes me into another like, way of how to become more tolerant is just this radical acceptance, like a way just to fully, not to say it's okay what happened, like it's not okay that you spill your drink, no, but not okay that you were playing and then your sister knocked it down because no, it's not saying it's okay what happened, but you are saying I accept what happened. I accept that this mistake has just been made. I accept that it's taken me 5 years to complete a 2-year program. Like, you simply accept it.
Mhm.
And once you can say, "It is something I accept," it allows you to be, like, mentally mobile, or it allows you to move, and it allows you to feel unstuck. So
Absolutely.
with tolerance and with that, abundance mindset and with having more confidence, these are some ways to eliminate some of those. And you know what? I can't even say eliminate. That's a poor word selection on my part. It's a way to decrease
Mhm.
how loud those negative mindsets are or pervasive in your life. And again, this is the same business wise. This is the same emotionally or mentally in your role as a daughter or a husband or brother. This could be applied professionally and personally with a little practice, of
Mhm.
course. And sometimes we need some extra support and accountability from somebody who cares about us, to be able to be consistent in applying these things.
I just see this so prevalent also in relationships, just it's just such a tone in relationships. If you have these negative mindsets that are occurring, it's you're in a bad situation, and you're going to have to change
Right.
some of this.
Right. I mean, and you kind of nailed it, right? Is to be on the receiving end of this, to be the one receiving this behavior. It's very difficult and taxing. So it's not just difficult for the person experiencing it, but it's difficult for the person around you as well. So if you're the perfectionist, think about this impact on your children.
Mhm.
Think about this impact on your spouse or
Mhm.
your team or your coworkers.
Yeah.
It's exhausting
Mhm.
because it's contagious.
Mhm.
Your attitude and your behavior is contagious. And it causes a lot of disconnect,
Mhm.
these type of reactions. And so I'm glad that you said that because we didn't even touch on that, right? That'd be another entire different session.
Mhm.
But you're
Yeah,
right. It's not healthy for the person experiencing it or for the person in their environment either.
absolutely. So many of these things just piggyback onto so many what we would call cognitive distortions, but
Right.
basically, uh, maladaptive thought processes, right?
Right. Big fancy
Um,
words and such. Yeah.
and so, absolutely. So it just can snowball into
Mhm.
so many different areas of your life. It can snowball in not only making you feel stuck, but also the people around you feel stuck.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Oh, well, Sarah, do you have any other thing that you want to touch on or share before we kind of start to wrap this up? I know our time is running just about out on us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of it in a nutshell. Believe it or not, there's lots of different mindsets that can keep us feeling stuck. And so, if after the end of this you say, "Ah, I can see how that could help," that could be the case for others. The truth is there's a multitude of other negative thinking patterns that keep us stuck. So the next time you feel like I feel like I'm not growing and I'm not moving or achieving my purpose or there's something missing, I'd encourage you to not just look at your situation or your environment because sometimes we wait on the world to change. We wait on the things outside of us to click before we feel better or different. And unfortunately, we can be waiting for the rest of our lives with that
Mhm.
mindset.
It's that perfect timing.
Right, exactly. And so one of the things that I would say is to reflect on the inside of your own mind and the inside of your own heart to say, what does it look like in there?
Mhm.
And a lot of times, again, if it's a bit dangerous to go there by yourself, there's people who would be willing to go with you, a close friend or a trusted support system, or even a counselor if you say, I don't have any of those things. But somebody who will go with you that will be in your corner to help you take a look at some of those things and hold yourself accountable. Um, but it's worth taking a look at so that you can get unstuck.
Yes. Ah, it was so good, Sarah. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this with us because I just love to hear different people's perspectives and the way that they utilize their words and the examples that they use because they help me just thinking about the toothpaste. That was such a great example of
Right.
scarcity. I love that.
Mhm.
So I just want to say thank you so much. And guys, we will see you. I actually have another live on Friday, so I'm really excited. I'm
Really cool.
going to have a young man come on, and he is actually working to make it. What is make it in Nashville as a country
Wow.
music singer? And so he's going to talk to us about the courage that it's taking him to go through that journey. And I'm sure there's lots of failures and lots of potential negative
Mhm.
thought patterns and mindsets that he had to overcome to also get on his journey. So I'm really excited about that. So join us again on Friday. And of course, you will get your reminder via YouTube and Facebook. But friends, thank you so much, and we will see you next time.
Bye.